Elara sat rigidly in the third pew of St. Matthew's Church, her gaze fixed on the mahogany casket that seemed to swallow the last vestiges of Arthur. The air was thick with a silence so profound it felt like a physical weight pressing down on her chest. Outside, a late autumn chill clung to the air, mirroring the cold emptiness that had settled deep within her. She clutched the faded, worn paper in her gloved hand, Arthur's final letter, a testament to his enduring love and a plea for her own strength. "Don't you ever feel small, Elara," he had written, his steady hand evident in every loop and line. "You are the strongest woman I know, and you hold the world in your hands." The words were a balm, yet they did little to staunch the bitter sting of her present reality. 43 years, 43 years of shared laughter, quiet companionship, fervent arguments, and unwavering devotion. They had built a life, a home, a family. Yet here she was, the sole mourner in a vast, echoing sanctuary. The rows of polished wood gleamed, vacant and unwelcoming. She imagined the church bustling on Sundays, filled with hymns and parishioners, a stark contrast to this solitary farewell. It was a testament to the quiet, private life Arthur had led, a life where few truly knew the depth of his character or the sacrifices he had made. But even so, the absence of anyone else, anyone at all, felt like a gaping wound. Just as the organist began a soft, mournful hymn, a sharp buzz vibrated in her purse, shattering the fragile peace. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling slightly. It was Julian, her only son. Her heart, already heavy, sank further as she read the terse message on the screen. "Sorry, Mom. Bethany's having an emergency with the salon. Can't make it." The words were like a slap, raw and insulting. Bethany's salon. An emergency with hair appointments, inventory, a broken nail dryer perhaps? Whatever it was, it had taken precedence over his father's final rites. The sheer audacity of it left her speechless, a silent scream building in her throat. A wave of heat surged through Elara, quickly followed by an icy calm. Her grip tightened on Arthur's letter. She had sacrificed so much for Julian, nurtured him, guided him, stood by him through every youthful folly and adult misstep. And this was his repayment, a text message, devoid of warmth or genuine sorrow, to explain his absence from his own father's funeral. The man who had taught him how to ride a bike, how to fish, how to stand up for himself. The man who had tucked him into bed every night and patiently answered every incessant, "Why, Dad?" Alara's anger, usually a slow burn, ignited into a fierce, consuming flame. It was an insult not just to Arthur, but to their entire shared life. The service itself was mercifully short, a swift, almost clinical affair. 47 minutes, Elara noted numbly, as if time itself were mocking the brevity of this final goodbye. A chaplain she'd never met read a few verses, spoke vaguely of a good man, and offered a prayer. Then came the military honor guard, their movements precise and solemn. They folded the American flag with practiced grace, its crisp edges snapping softly in the quiet air. The lead officer knelt before her, presenting the triangular flag with an earnest, "On behalf of a grateful nation." It was a moment of profound dignity, a tribute to Arthur's service as a Navy SEAL that only deepened the sting of Julian's absence. He had missed this too. He had missed everything. The drive home was a blur of muted colors and silent streets. The landscape outside her window seemed to weep along with her silent tears. The autumn leaves, once vibrant, now lay in desolate heaps, their beauty faded, their purpose served. She pulled into the driveway of the house she had shared with Arthur for decades, a house that now felt vast and cavernous, each brick, each window pane, hummed with his memory. The porch swing, where they'd shared countless cups of coffee, the rose bushes he tended with such care, even the faint scent of his pipe tobacco that still clung to the air near the front door. It was all a painful, beautiful reminder of what she had lost. Inside, the silence was even more oppressive. The echoes of a life lived resonated in every room. His favorite armchair sat empty by the fireplace. His worn slippers waited beside his side of the bed. Elara walked slowly through the house, her fingers trailing over familiar objects, each touch a fresh wave of grief. The weight of her solitude pressed down on her, an almost unbearable burden. She sat at the kitchen table, the unread newspaper still folded on its surface, as if waiting for Arthur to pick it up. A cup of tea grew cold, forgotten. Just as dusk began to bleed into the sky, painting the living room in hues of soft purple and gray, her phone rang again. It was Julian. She hesitated, a knot forming in her stomach, before answering. His voice, when it came, was too bright, too casual. "Hey, Mom, how did everything go today?" There was no hint of apology, no regret, no sorrow, just a detached curiosity, as if he were inquiring about a doctor's appointment. The anger flared again, sharper this time. She swallowed, forcing her voice to remain steady. "It went as well as it could, Julian." She didn't offer details, didn't mention the empty pews, didn't mention the flag presentation, which he had so casually missed. He didn't ask. Instead, he plunged right into the reason for his call, confirming her darkest suspicions. "Listen, I really need to talk about Dad's stuff. Can I come over tomorrow morning? There's a lot we need to sort through." His words were like a cold hand tightening around her heart, making her stomach clench with an unpleasant mixture of dread and resentment. He didn't care about Arthur. Not really. He cared about what Arthur had left behind. "Tomorrow," Alara agreed, her voice flat, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. Julian was relentless, however, not sensing or perhaps not caring about her emotional state. He reiterated his plan, insisting on an early start, his tone revealing an urgency that had nothing to do with grief. A chilling premonition, a cold, dark certainty began to settle over her. After hanging up, Alara found herself drawn to Arthur's study, his sanctuary. It was a room filled with the scent of old books and pipe tobacco, a place where he had spent countless hours. She moved instinctively towards his large mahogany desk, its surface orderly, just as he had left it. Her gaze fell upon a small, unassuming metal box, tucked away on a lower shelf behind a stack of journals. It was a plain rectangular box, the kind one might keep old coins or stamps in. Arthur had always been meticulous, and this box, she knew, held something important. She reached for it, her fingers brushing against the cold metal. It was locked. Arthur had a knack for hiding keys in plain sight. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on a small wooden bird carved from a block of oak, a gift from Julian when he was a boy. She lifted the bird, and there, nestled beneath its base, was a tiny, intricately cut key. With a deep breath, Alara inserted the key into the lock and turned. The click was surprisingly loud in the silent room. Inside, resting on a bed of velvet, was Arthur's Navy SEAL medal, gleaming softly in the dim light. It was a powerful, tangible symbol of his decorated service, a lifetime of courage and sacrifice. A memory surfaced, unbidden. Julian, a few years back, had seen the medal displayed on a shelf and had idly asked, "What's that worth, Dad? Something like that has to be valuable, right?" Arthur had merely smiled, a knowing look in his eyes, and said, "Its value isn't measured in money, son." The memory now twisted into something sinister, filling Alara with a growing sense of dread. Julian had always been fixated on material things, but this felt different. As she held the medal, its weight heavy in her palm, a cold certainty settled in Alara's heart. Julian's visit tomorrow wasn't about comforting his grieving mother or honoring his late father. It was about this, about anything he perceived as valuable. The premonition, once a vague unease, solidified into a stark, chilling reality. Tomorrow, she knew, would be a test of her strength, just as Arthur had always believed her capable, and she was ready. The next morning dawned gray and damp, mirroring the heavy cloud that had settled over Alara's heart. She had spent a restless night, the premonition from the previous evening solidifying into a grim certainty. Arthur's house, usually a haven of quiet comfort, felt charged with an uneasy anticipation. She dressed in a simple, dark dress, her usual vibrant colors feeling inappropriate for the somber day ahead. A fresh pot of coffee brewed, its aroma doing little to dispel the tension that clung to the air. Precisely 30 minutes past the agreed-upon time, the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway announced their arrival. Alara watched from the living room window as Julian's sleek black car pulled up. He emerged first, his usually sharp demeanor softened by a carefully constructed mask of somberness. Then Bethany, his wife, stepped out. Alara's gaze snagged on Bethany's coat, a luxurious cashmere garment, the kind that cost more than Alara's entire monthly pension. It seemed an odd choice for someone supposedly rushing from a salon emergency. Julian offered a quick, perfunctory hug as they stepped inside, his eyes already scanning the foyer, as if assessing the house's contents. Bethany, on the other hand, launched into a breathless apology, her words spilling out in a rapid-fire torrent. "Oh, Elara, I am so terribly sorry about yesterday," she began, her tone a practiced blend of concern and self-pity. "It was an absolute disaster at the salon, truly. 3 inches of water, can you imagine? We were knee-deep in it. Julian just had to help me manage the contractors and everything." Elara's lips thinned into a forced smile, a thin veneer over the simmering anger within her. 3 inches of water? In a modern salon? It sounded utterly fabricated, a flimsy excuse concocted to avoid the inconvenience of a funeral. The mental image of Bethany in her expensive coat, wading through 3 inches of water in a salon, was almost laughable, but the hurt was too deep for humor. She simply nodded, offering a tight, "I understand," though she understood nothing of the sort. She understood their priorities, however, with a painful clarity. She led them into the living room, a space filled with the silent testament of Arthur's life, his collection of naval history books, the old globe he used to spin while telling Julian stories of far-off lands, the framed photographs capturing decades of family moments. The air in the room, usually comforting, now felt thick with an unspoken agenda. Elara could practically feel their impatience, a palpable eagerness beneath their thin veil of condolences. Julian wasted no time. He sat on the edge of the armchair, avoiding the worn, familiar comfort of his father's favorite spot. "Mom," he began, his voice taking on a businesslike tone, "Bethany and I can't stay long. Things are still chaotic at the salon, you know. But we really need to discuss something important." He paused, not for a response, but for effect. Elara braced herself, her grip tightening on the armrest of her own chair. "Look, Mom," Julian continued, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. "We need to be practical about Dad's affairs. The funeral was, well, it was more expensive than we anticipated. And with the house being so old, I'm sure there are a lot of repairs coming up. We have to think about your future, your financial stability." His words, while superficially concerned, were laced with a cold, calculated undertone. "There are some valuable items of Dad's that we should consider, things that are just sitting here, not doing anyone any good." Elara's gaze sharpened. She knew where this was going. She had known since Julian's phone call the previous night. "What valuable items are you referring to, Julian?" she asked, her voice calm despite the storm brewing inside her. Julian shifted, catching Bethany's eye for a moment before looking back at his mother. "Well, you know, his military medals and his old uniform, maybe. Collectors pay good money for things like that, especially from a SEAL. They're unique historical artifacts, really." He spoke of them as if they were mere commodities, stripped of their inherent meaning, of the blood, sweat, and sacrifice they represented. "Arthur's medals are not for sale, Julian," Elara stated, her voice firm, leaving no room for negotiation. "They are priceless. They represent his service, his courage, everything he stood for. They will stay right here, with me, in this house." Julian waved a dismissive hand. "Come on, Mom, let's be realistic. What are you going to do with them? Keep them in a dusty old box? Dad wouldn't want you to struggle." "I've actually already done some research. I found a collector, a serious buyer, who's very interested in the Navy SEAL medal in particular. He's willing to pay $15,000 for it." He delivered the figure with an expectant smirk, as if it were an undeniable triumph. $15,000. The sum hung in the air, a stark insult. It reduced Arthur's entire distinguished career, his bravery, his dedication, to a mere monetary transaction. Elara felt a tremor of fury run through her. $15,000? She repeated, her voice laced with incredulity. "Julian, that medal represents a lifetime. It represents courage, duty, and sacrifice. It is priceless. It is not for sale." Bethany, who had been silently observing, now leaned forward, her perfectly manicured hands clasped in front of her. Her voice was smooth, deceptively gentle, a silken trap. "Elara, dear, think about it. Julian is just trying to help you. This house, it's so charming, but it's old. It needs work. What about your future? Do you want to be house poor? A little nest egg like that could make all the difference. It could cover all those funeral costs too, and take some pressure off Julian. He's working so hard for us, you know. Her words were a veiled manipulation, painting Julian as the dutiful son and Alara as an obstacle to her own well-being. Julian seized the opening Bethany had created. His voice, now devoid of even the pretense of concern, was chillingly practical. Exactly, Mom. Think of it as an investment in your comfort. Besides, he added, his eyes meeting hers with an unnerving coldness, it's not like Dad's around to miss it, is it? The casual cruelty of his remarks struck Alara like a physical blow. Her breath caught in her throat. Her son, her only child, speaking of his recently deceased father as if he were a forgotten trinket, a past inconvenience whose absence cleared the way for profit. The mask of sorrow, of concern, had completely fallen away, revealing the raw, ugly greed beneath. In that moment, Alara saw not the boy she had raised, but a stranger, corrupted and callous. A fierce resolve ignited within her, burning away the grief and the shock. This was not about money, not about the house, not about her future. This was about respect, about honor, about the memory of a good man being desecrated for profit. The answer, Alara said, her voice low and steady, each word carefully articulated, is no. It will never be for sale, and I would like you both to leave now. Julian's eyes narrowed, a flicker of genuine anger replacing his practiced indifference. Mom, you're being completely emotional right now. This is exactly why Bethany and I need to handle Dad's affairs. You're clearly not thinking straight. Alara rose slowly from her chair, her back ramrod straight. She looked at her son, then at his wife, her gaze unwavering. My emotions are perfectly clear, Julian, and Arthur's affairs will be handled by me. Now, if you'll excuse me, she gestured towards the front door, her meaning unmistakable. The front door clicked shut with a definitive thud, severing the last thread of Julian and Bethany's unwelcome presence. Alara stood for a moment in the sudden silence, the echoes of their calculating voices still ringing in her ears. The anger that had sustained her through their confrontation began to recede, leaving behind a raw, aching emptiness. Her gaze fell upon Arthur's favorite armchair, still bearing the faint indentation where he had last sat. Slowly she walked over and sank into its worn leather cushions, the familiar scent of him enveloping her in a bittersweet embrace. It was then, for the first time since Arthur's passing, that the dam finally broke. Tears, hot and heavy, streamed down her cheeks, blurring her vision. They were tears of grief, yes, for the man she had lost, but also tears of profound sadness for the son she felt she had already buried. The betrayal, the callous disregard for Arthur's memory, had sliced deeper than any wound. She wept for the lost innocence of a son who had once looked at his father with adoration, and for the ugly transformation that greed had wrought. But even as the tears flowed, a new emotion began to stir within her, hardening the soft edges of her grief. It was a resolve, sharp and unyielding, born from the depths of her pain. They had underestimated her, she realized. Julian and Bethany saw her as an old woman, emotional and vulnerable, easily manipulated. They saw Arthur's legacy as a commodity. They were wrong. She would not let them desecrate his memory. Wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, Alara pushed herself out of the chair, her movements stiff but determined. She walked back to Arthur's study, the place where she had found the locked metal box just last night. The box sat on the desk, a silent sentinel to secrets yet to be fully revealed. She picked it up, its weight solid and reassuring in her hands, and carried it back to the living room, settling it on the coffee table in front of her. With a deep, steadying breath, Alara opened the box. Inside, nestled beneath the Navy SEAL medal were several neatly folded documents. She picked up the first one, a faded commendation from decades ago, detailing Arthur's early service. Then her fingers brushed against a stack of more recent letters, their paper crisp and official. Her heart gave a sudden lurch as she recognized the distinctive emblem of the Pentagon emblazoned on the letterhead. The letters were addressed to Arthur, each bearing a series of complex security clearances. The most recent one, dated just 2 weeks before his passing, stood out. It was signed by a General Sterling. Alara's eyes scanned the text, her brow furrowing in concentration. Her mind struggled to comprehend the words, to reconcile the quiet, retired man she knew with the extraordinary details unfolding before her. The letter spoke of Arthur's unwavering courage and strategic brilliance during the classified operation in Syria. It detailed his instrumental role in the successful extraction of Ambassador Davies's daughter from a highly volatile situation. Alara gasped softly. Syria? Ambassador Davies' daughter? Arthur had never spoken a word of this. She knew he had served, of course, but his SEAL days felt like a distant, almost mythical past, something confined to the black and white photographs of a younger man. He had always been so private about his military career, a characteristic she had respected and never questioned. The letter continued, stating that Arthur's actions represented the highest ideals of military service, and that the Pentagon was considering posthumous recognition for his extraordinary bravery and tactical genius in carrying out this critical mission. Posthumous recognition. Her Arthur, a hero on such a grand scale, operating in the shadows, saving lives, while she worried about garden club meetings and grocery lists. A fresh wave of emotions washed over her, pride, awe, and a searing realization of just how much she had yet to learn about the man she had loved for over 4 decades. Her hands trembled slightly as she noticed a phone number printed at the bottom of the letter, accompanied by the name General Sterling and an official Pentagon extension. Without a moment's hesitation, driven by an instinctive need for clarity and truth, Alara picked up her phone. She dialed the number, her finger lingering on each digit. It rang only twice before a crisp, authoritative voice answered. General Sterling. General Sterling, Alara began, her voice surprisingly steady. My name is Alara Vance. I'm Arthur Vance's widow. There was a brief pause on the other end, a shift in the general's tone from official to deeply empathetic. Mrs. Vance, my deepest condolences on your loss. Arthur was one of the finest men I ever had the privilege of serving with, a true patriot. His words were genuine, imbued with a profound respect that resonated deeply with Alara. Thank you, General, she replied, a lump forming in her throat. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the question she was about to ask. General, I'm holding a letter you sent Arthur regarding his work in Syria, and I also have his Navy SEAL medal. My son, Julian, was just here. He was trying to convince me to sell it. He said he found a collector willing to pay $15,000 for it. She waited, her heart pounding in her chest. The general's voice, which had been warm with sympathy, now turned deadly serious, his tone sharpening with an unmistakable edge of command. Mrs. Vance, he said, each word deliberate and grave, that medal is more than just a piece of metal. It is irreplaceable. Its significance goes far beyond any monetary value. And for anyone to attempt to sell it, particularly his own son, is not only a profound dishonor to your husband's legacy, but it is also a direct violation of federal law. Alara felt a cold dread spread through her. Federal law? She whispered. Yes, Mrs. Vance. Military medals awarded for valor, like Arthur's Navy SEAL medal, are considered federal property. While they are bestowed upon the recipient, their sale is strictly prohibited under several statutes. To attempt to profit from such an emblem of valor is an egregious offense, Mrs. Vance, especially given what that particular medal represents. He continued, his voice heavy with solemnity. Arthur's medal isn't just any SEAL medal. It was awarded for an operation that remains classified even now. An operation that, without Arthur's unparalleled skill and leadership, would have been a catastrophic failure. It represents one of the most successful rescue operations in Navy SEAL history. $15,000, he scoffed, the sound sharp with contempt, is an insult. It trivializes the extraordinary heroism and the profound impact of your husband's actions. It is a symbol of unparalleled courage. Alara listened, her breath held captive in her chest. The words hung in the air, weighted with the true measure of Arthur's greatness, a greatness she was only now fully comprehending. She closed her eyes for a moment, the image of Julian's greedy face flashing before her. The betrayal now felt even more profound, a sacrilege against a hero. She hung up the phone, the receiver feeling heavy in her hand, the revelation still echoing in her mind. Arthur's secret life, his silent heroism, and Julian's shocking illegal act. A wave of resolve, stronger than ever, settled over her. They had gravely misjudged Alara Vance. Alara spent a sleepless night, the revelations from General Sterling echoing in her mind like a solemn, insistent drumbeat. Arthur's quiet heroism, his secret life as a guardian of national security, painted a portrait of a man far more extraordinary than she had ever imagined. The weight of the Navy SEAL medal, now imbued with such profound historical and legal significance, felt heavy in the darkness. Julian's brazen attempt to sell it, and the general's stern warning about federal law twisted in her gut. She tossed and turned, the image of Arthur, stoic and selfless, warring with the image of Julian, grasping and self-serving. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of soft pink and gray, Alara made a decision. She needed more. More details, more understanding of the depth of Arthur's service, and more clarity on the implications of Julian's actions. She found the General Sterling's number in her call history and dialed it, her fingers steady despite the tremor in her heart. "General Sterling," she said, her voice clear and resolute when he answered. "It's Alara Vance again. I apologize for calling so early, but I couldn't sleep. I need to know more about Operation Desert Rose." Arthur never spoke of it. There was a brief pause, then the general's voice, infused with a newfound respect, softened. "Mrs. Vance, it's no trouble at all. I understand completely. Arthur was an extraordinary man, and it's right that you know the full scope of his heroism. Operation Desert Rose. It was a Black Ops mission, highly sensitive. Arthur led a team of 4 SEALs deep into hostile territory in Syria. Their objective was to extract 6 American aid workers and an ambassador's daughter who had been taken hostage by a particularly brutal militant group." Alara listened, mesmerized, as the general painted a vivid, harrowing picture. "The intel was compromised, Mrs. Vance. They walked into an ambush. Arthur, with his incredible tactical mind, not only managed to neutralize the immediate threat, but orchestrated an improvised escape plan under heavy fire. For 47 minutes, a mere handful of men, led by your husband, held off an overwhelming force, protecting those hostages with their lives until extraction could be secured. He saved all 6 of them, Mrs. Vance. All 6 came home because of Arthur's leadership and unparalleled bravery." He paused, letting the magnitude of the story sink in. "That medal, Mrs. Vance," he continued, his voice heavy with reverence, "the one your son was attempting to sell. It is not merely a common decoration. It is one of only 12 ever awarded in the history of the Navy SEALs or for that specific type of valor in a covert operation. It's a piece of military history, a symbol of extreme courage, resilience, and tactical genius. Its rarity is matched only by the incredible story behind it." Alara's breath hitched in her throat. 12. Only 12 such medals existed, and Julian had dismissed it as a mere $15,000 trinket. Now 20,000. The insult was sharper, the betrayal more profound. "And Mrs. Vance," General Sterling added, a note of quiet pride in his voice, "Arthur didn't just retire after that. He continued to serve, unofficially of course, as a classified consultant for special operations. He was a strategic genius, a quiet advisor whose insights were invaluable. We have a 200-page file at the Pentagon detailing his ongoing contributions, even in his later years. He dedicated his entire life to this nation, long after he ostensibly hung up his uniform." A 200-page file. Arthur, her Arthur, who spent his days puttering in the garden and reading detective novels, had been a silent guardian, a hidden hero. Alara felt a surge of overwhelming pride mixed with a deep, aching regret that she had never known the full extent of his greatness until now. Then General Sterling's tone shifted, becoming more formal. "Mrs. Vance, the President himself has been briefed on Arthur's passing. He wishes to personally thank the surviving members of Operation Desert Rose, and he wants to honor Arthur's memory, publicly and properly. We would be honored if you would consider coming to Washington to accept a posthumous commendation on Arthur's behalf and for us to formally acknowledge his extraordinary service." Alara was stunned into silence. The President, Washington, a public commendation. It was more than she could have ever imagined, a fitting tribute to a man who had lived such a remarkable, humble life. "General," she finally managed, her voice thick with emotion, I, I would be honored. Just as Alara hung up, still reeling from the general's invitation, her phone rang again. It was Julian. She hesitated, a fresh wave of dread washing over her. Mom, Bunning, Julian began, his voice surprisingly upbeat, lacking any trace of yesterday's confrontation. I've been thinking about what we discussed, about Dad's medal. Alara's heart sank. She knew. She felt it in her bones. I've actually reconsidered, Julian continued, a note of false sincerity in his tone. I've been shopping around a bit more, speaking to a few different collectors, and it seems there's even more interest than I initially thought. Good news, Mom, that collector? He's now willing to pay $20,000 for the Navy SEAL medal. 20,000, Mom, that's a significant amount. Think of what you could do with that. The contempt in Alara's heart solidified into a cold, hard knot. Shopping around. He had been shopping around his father's medal like a common trinket, a commodity to be bartered and haggled over. $20,000 for one of only 12 such medals in existence. A medal representing a secret, life-saving mission. A medal that was federal property and illegal to sell. The audacity, the utter disregard for everything Arthur stood for, was staggering. Julian, Alara said, her voice flat, emotionless. Why the sudden urgency? $20,000 all of a sudden? Julian's bravado faltered slightly. Well, Mom, it's a lot of money, and Bethany and I, we really need it. The salon, it's been struggling more than we let on, and our credit card debt is piling up. This money could save us. It could save the salon. It would really help us get back on our feet. The desperation in his voice was undeniable now, peeling back the layers of pretense. A chilling premonition, far worse than anything she had felt before, gripped Alara. It wasn't just that he wanted to sell it. It was worse, much worse. Julian, she said, her voice barely a whisper, a cold dread seeping into her bones. Have you already sold the medal? The silence that followed stretched, agonizing, a resounding confirmation of her deepest fear. She could hear Julian's ragged breath on the other end of the line, the rustle of fabric, the desperate hesitation. Finally, his voice came, small and broken, stripped of all its earlier false confidence. Mom, I had to. Bethany was about to lose the salon. I saw an opportunity and I took it. I sold it yesterday after I left your house. If you're finding Alara's story as gripping as I am, please keep watching to see how this unfolds. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated with more incredible stories. Alara's world tilted on its axis. The phone slipped from her numb fingers, clattering onto the worn carpet. Julian had sold it. He hadn't just tried to sell it. He had stolen it and sold it. Without her permission, without a shred of respect for his father's memory, and, as General Sterling had made painfully clear, in direct violation of federal law. The horror of it clawed at her throat, a sickening combination of grief, rage, and profound betrayal. Her son, her only child, was not just misguided. He was a thief, a criminal. Julian's voice, now tinged with a desperate plea, crackled through the phone speaker, which Alara had haphazardly put on mute as she grappled with the enormity of his confession. Mom, are you there? Please, say something. Bethany was really desperate. I had to do it. It was for her, for us. Alara picked up the phone, her hand trembling. Julian, she managed, her voice a strained whisper. You stole your father's medal. A medal that represents the most profound act of heroism. A medal that is federal property. How could you? Stole it? Julian's voice rose in indignation, the self-pity quickly giving way to anger. Dad was my father too, Mom. I had just as much right to that medal as you did. More even being his son. You wouldn't have sold it, you would have just kept it in a dusty box like everything else. Alara's composure, already shattered, was now replaced by a chilling calm. No, Julian, you had no right, she stated, each word precise and cutting. Arthur's will clearly states that everything, every single asset, belongs to me. You had no legal claim to anything, let alone his most cherished possession. You stole it, Julian, plain and simple. It's not stealing if it was practically mine. he retorted, his voice shrill. And anyway, it's done. The sale is final. He paid in cash. There's no getting it back now. Who? Alara demanded, her mind racing. Who did you sell it to? You need to get it back, Julian, now. Julian hesitated, a nervous cough rattling in his throat. His name is Marcus Webb. He owns a place called Military Treasures on 5th Street. It's a small shop, kind of tucked away. He seemed very interested. He supplied the information grudgingly, clearly believing the matter to be closed. Marcus Webb, Military Treasures, 5th Street. Alara's mind cataloged the details, a grim determination hardening her features. She hung up, Julian's protest still echoing faintly in the disconnected line. Her first priority was clear. She needed to inform General Sterling. She redialed the Pentagon number, her heart hammering against her ribs. General Sterling, Alara said, barely waiting for him to finish his greeting. It's Alara Vance again. I have terrible news. Julian, he sold the medal. He confessed just now. He sold Arthur's Navy SEAL medal to a man named Marcus Webb, who owns a shop called Military Treasures on 5th Street. There was a silence on the other end, a silence far more chilling than any shout. When General Sterling finally spoke, his voice was no longer sympathetic or even grave. It was steel-cold, sharp and cutting, imbued with the full authority of the military. Mrs. Vance, he said, his words clipped and precise. The individual you refer to as Marcus Webb is known to us. His real name is Simon Reed. He runs a black market operation for stolen military memorabilia. And as of this moment, he is in possession of stolen federal property. This is no longer just a domestic dispute, Mrs. Vance. This is a federal matter. Alara clutched the phone tighter, her knuckles white. Stolen federal property, she repeated, the words tasting like ash. Precisely, the general affirmed. I will initiate immediate action. We have been trying to build a case against Reed for some time. This may be the break we needed. You've given us invaluable information, Mrs. Vance. Then General Sterling's tone shifted slightly, a new layer of concern entering his voice. Mrs. Vance, there's something else we need to discuss. Given Julian's actions, I am concerned about other matters. Did Arthur ever discuss his consultant's pension with you? Alara frowned. Consultant's pension? No, General. I had no idea he was still working in any capacity, let alone receiving a pension. I suspected as much, the General sighed, a note of grim confirmation in his voice. Arthur was receiving a rather substantial consultant's pension, Mrs. Vance, $4,200 a month, and as his designated beneficiary, that pension should have automatically transferred to you upon his passing. Have you received any correspondence regarding this? Alara's mind reeled. $4,200 a month? And no, she hadn't received a single letter, not a single penny. A sickening realization began to dawn on her, connecting Julian's current financial desperation with his earlier actions. No, General, she said slowly, her voice barely a whisper. Nothing, not a single letter, not a single payment. I see, General Sterling said, his voice hardening once more. And what about a military life insurance policy? All active and former classified consultants are covered by a substantial policy. Arthur's was for $250,000. Again, as his designated beneficiary, you should have been contacted by now. $250,000, another bombshell. Alara felt a cold dread seep into her bones. She had received absolutely nothing. The pieces began to click into place, forming a horrifying picture. Julian's eagerness to help with paperwork after Arthur's passing, his insistence on handling everything, his sudden desperate need for cash. He had been so quick to offer to deal with the nuisances of managing Arthur's affairs. General, Alara said, her voice strained, Julian was very insistent on handling all of Arthur's mail and official documents after he passed. He said I was too emotional to deal with it, that he would help me sort through everything. The memory now felt sinister, not helpful. General Sterling's response was immediate and grim. Mrs. Vance, that sounds dangerously like mail fraud and potentially identity theft. If Julian intercepted your mail, withheld information regarding these significant sums, and possibly even submitted fraudulent claims, the legal ramifications are severe. I'm going to need you to gather any and all documents you can find regarding Arthur's finances and military service. Do not let Julian or anyone else touch them. Do you understand?" Alara understood, all too well. Her son hadn't just stolen a medal, he had potentially stolen her future, her financial security, and the peaceful, dignified grieving process she deserved. The web of Julian's lies and deceptions was far more intricate and far more sinister than she could have ever imagined. The battle for Arthur's legacy and her own peace of mind was just beginning. The weight of General Sterling's words, mail fraud, identity theft, federal felonies, pressed down on Alara like a physical burden. She couldn't shake the image of Julian, feigning concern, offering to help her, all while systematically dismantling her future. The anger, cold and sharp, had become a constant companion. She knew she had to act, and quickly. Her first stop was the local post office. The small, familiar building, usually a place of mundane errands, now felt charged with a sense of urgent justice. She found Brenda, her longtime mail carrier, sorting letters behind the counter. Brenda, a kind woman with a perpetually cheerful demeanor, greeted Alara with a sympathetic smile. "Mrs. Vance, I'm so sorry about Arthur. He was such a lovely man." Alara offered a tight, polite smile in return. "Thank you, Brenda. I actually have a question for you if you have a moment." She explained her concerns about missing mail, specifically mentioning official documents related to Arthur's pension and insurance. Brenda frowned, her brow furrowing in concentration. "Missing mail, you say? Well, now, that's unusual. We're usually very thorough. Let me check the records." She bustled over to a computer terminal, her fingers flying across the keyboard. After a moment, she looked up, her expression shifting from friendly concern to something more hesitant. "Mrs. Vance, it says here that your son, Julian, has been picking up your mail for the last several months. He presented a notarized letter of authorization giving him permission to collect all mail addressed to your residence." Alara's heart dropped to her stomach. Notarized letter of authorization. The words echoed with a chilling finality. Julian hadn't just intercepted her mail. He had gone to elaborate lengths to create a paper trail to make his theft appear legitimate. He had forged a note, likely faking Arthur's signature, or even hers, and had it notarized. The sheer audacity, the depth of his deception, left her breathless. He did what?" Alara whispered, the blood draining from her face. Brenda, sensing Alara's distress, looked genuinely apologetic. "Yes, Mrs. Vance, it's all here, signed and dated. He's been coming in quite regularly. I just assumed, well, I assumed you knew, of course, that he was just helping you out." Alara forced herself to nod, offering another weak thank you before turning and walking out of the post office, the familiar chime of the door sounding like a death knell. She drove home in a daze, the world outside her car window a blur. The realization that Julian had been systematically stealing from her, from Arthur for months, even before his death, was a gut-wrenching blow. He hadn't just sold a medal, he had orchestrated a calculated scheme of theft and fraud. Back in Arthur's office, Alara resumed her search, her hands shaking slightly, but her resolve now steely. This was no longer just about sentiment or honor. It was about justice. She meticulously sifted through every file, every document, her eyes sharp, looking for anything that might shed more light on Julian's treachery. Her search led her to a neatly labeled folder, Insurance. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside, among Arthur's legitimate policy documents, she found it. A claim form for Arthur's military life insurance policy. Her eyes darted to the beneficiary section. Not Alara Vance, but Julian Vance. And beneath it, a stamped notification. Claim approved. Date, 3 weeks ago. A sum, $250,000. The air rushed out of Alara's lungs. $250,000. The money had been paid out, not to her, but to Julian. He had forged the beneficiary change, submitted the claim, and collected the payout, all while feigning sorrow and concern for her. Her son had stolen her entire inheritance, her financial security for her remaining years. The betrayal was so profound, so devastating, that it left her hollowed out. She immediately called General Sterling again, her voice tight with suppressed emotion as she relayed her discovery. General, she said, her voice barely a whisper, I found it. Julian changed the beneficiary on Arthur's military life insurance policy to himself. And the claim for $250,000 was approved 3 weeks ago. He's already received the money. General Sterling's voice, when he responded, was laced with grim certainty. Mrs. Vance, what you've described constitutes multiple federal felonies: mail fraud, insurance fraud, and aggravated identity theft. Each carries a substantial prison sentence, potentially up to 20 years for the combination of offenses. This is no longer a matter for local authorities. I'm contacting the FBI's white-collar crime division immediately. This is serious, Mrs. Vance. Alara took a deep, shuddering breath. The gravity of the situation was immense. Her son, facing decades in prison. But the alternative, letting him get away with it, letting him walk free with her money and Arthur's honor, was unthinkable. It would mean that Arthur's life, his sacrifice, his legacy, meant nothing. I understand, General, she said, her voice firm. I want to proceed. I want justice. Within the hour, Alara received a call from Agent Miller, a terse, professional woman from the FBI's white-collar crime division. Agent Miller confirmed they had already acted. Mrs. Vance, she explained, her voice crisp and efficient, General Sterling's information was invaluable. We have immediately placed a freeze on the fraudulent insurance claim. Any accounts linked to Julian Vance are now under scrutiny. Furthermore, we've issued a federal warrant for the immediate return of Arthur's Navy SEAL medal from Simon Reed, also known as Marcus Webb, at Military Treasures. He's now a material witness in a federal investigation involving stolen government property. Alara felt a flicker of grim satisfaction. The wheels of justice, though slow, were beginning to turn. No sooner had she hung up with Agent Miller than her phone rang again, displaying Bethany's name. Alara hesitated for a moment, then answered, Viola! Bethany's voice was high-pitched, laced with raw panic. Viola, we need to talk. Ellis is panicking. He just got a call from some government agency, and they froze all our accounts. What did you do? She used Alara's old family nickname, a desperate attempt to invoke a sense of closeness, of shared history. Alara's voice, in contrast, was calm, almost detached. I reported the theft of Arthur's medal, Bethany, and the fraud regarding his insurance policy. As General Sterling told me, the medal is federal property, and stealing $250,000 from me is a federal felony. There was a choked gasp on the other end of the line. Bethany's voice, which had been frantic, now turned genuinely scared, trembling. The insurance? Viola, please, you don't understand. We needed that money. We used it to save the salon, to pay off our debts. We were going to lose everything. Please, you have to tell them to stop. Please, let this go. Alara closed her eyes, picturing Arthur's face, then Julian's. The image of the forged documents, the stolen mail, the casual cruelty of his remarks. It's out of my hands, Bethany, Alara said, her voice devoid of emotion. The FBI is involved now. This isn't a family matter anymore. It's a matter of federal law. The aftermath of Alara's decision was swift and brutal. Within hours of her conversation with Bethany, the ripple effect of federal intervention began to materialize. The phone, which had previously rung with the casual calls of friends and family, now buzzed with official urgency. The first call came from an unfamiliar number. Mrs. Vance, this is Simon Reed, a nervous voice announced. I run Military Treasures, or Marcus Webb, as Julian introduced me. I'm calling to profusely apologize for any involvement in this unfortunate situation. The FBI has made it very clear that I am in possession of stolen federal property. I had absolutely no idea. I assure you, Julian presented me with what appeared to be legitimate estate documents and a notarized letter of authorization for the sale of his father's belongings. I am so terribly sorry. Alara listened, her expression unreadable. Another notarized letter of authorization. Julian had been meticulous in his deception. So, you're returning the medal? She asked, cutting to the chase. Immediately, Mrs. Vance, of course, Reed stammered. A federal agent is already on the way to collect it. I just wanted to apologize personally and to inform you, Julian sold the medal for $12,500, not the $20,000 he told you. Alara's lips thinned. Another lie. Julian hadn't just stolen from her and his father, he had inflated the price to his mother, likely pocketing the difference or simply further demonstrating his casual disregard for the truth. $12,500 for an irreplaceable piece of military history. The insult deepened. Later that afternoon, Agent Miller called again, her voice still professional, but with a hint of resolution. Mrs. Vance, I have an update on Julian Vance. He was picked up this morning. After some persuasion, he confessed to mail fraud and insurance fraud. He's agreed to cooperate fully with the investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence. The plea agreement will likely result in a 3-year sentence in federal prison. 3 years, a federal prison. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of Julian's shattered future. Alara felt no joy, only a profound sadness for the path he had chosen. And the money? She asked, her voice quiet. Full restitution is required, Mrs. Vance, Agent Miller confirmed. Every cent of that $250,000 will be returned to you. Additionally, any assets purchased with the stolen funds will be forfeited. That includes the salon, their personal vehicle, and any other significant purchases. He and Bethany will be starting over. Completely. Bethany? Alara asked. She's cooperating as well, Agent Miller replied. While Julian was the primary instigator, she was complicit. She'll likely face accessory charges, but with her cooperation, it may be a suspended sentence or probation, depending on the prosecutor's discretion. But she won't escape consequences. Alara absorbed the news. The salon, the symbol of their desperate ambition, gone. Their lives, built on a foundation of lies and greed, crumbling. It was a harsh justice, but it was justice nonetheless. Just as the sun began to set, painting the sky in fiery hues, Alara received another call, this one bringing a glimmer of profound hope and solemn pride. It was General Sterling. Mrs. Vance, he began, his voice imbued with a rare warmth. I have wonderful news. The President has personally approved a special ceremony. It will be held next month in Washington, D.C. at the National Museum of the Marine Corps. Not only will Arthur be posthumously honored for Operation Desert Rose, but we will also be paying tribute to the other members of that incredible team. Alara's heart swelled. That's wonderful, General. Truly. Are the other members of his team still alive? General Sterling's voice softened further. Mrs. Vance, I'm afraid I have some bittersweet news. You see, after Arthur's passing, we realized he was the last surviving member of that original team. The others, they all passed away in the intervening decades, some from old age, some from the lingering wounds of their service, both seen and unseen. Arthur carried their memories, their stories for decades. He was the keeper of their legacy. A wave of emotion washed over Alara. Arthur, the stoic, quiet man, had carried such an immense burden, such a precious trust for all those years. He had honored his comrades by living a life of quiet dignity and continued service, even as he mourned their loss in silence. However, General Sterling continued, his voice regaining a note of enthusiasm, many of their families, their children and grandchildren, are still alive. We've reached out to them, and they are overjoyed at the opportunity to finally see their fathers and grandfathers recognized. You will not be alone, Mrs. Vance. You will be surrounded by the families of heroes, all united in honoring these remarkable men, and most especially, Arthur. The prospect filled Alara with a profound sense of purpose. This was what Arthur deserved. This was his true legacy. Inspired by the revelations, Alara returned to Arthur's study. Her perspective irrevocably shifted. The metal box and its contents had been merely the tip of the iceberg. She began a deeper, more thorough search through his personal papers, moving beyond the official documents. She found old photo albums, filled not just with family snapshots, but with dozens of candid pictures of Arthur with other men in uniform, their faces etched with camaraderie and shared experience. In a hidden compartment of his desk, she discovered a treasure trove of letters. Not official correspondence, but personal letters. Dozens of them, from families she didn't know, expressing profound gratitude. Thank you for saving my father, one read. We never knew the full story, but we knew he wouldn't be here without you, read another. They were from the families of the aid workers, the ambassador's daughter, and other individuals whose lives Arthur had quietly touched, either directly or indirectly, through his classified work. She found photos from reunions she had never known about, informal gatherings of men with weary eyes but strong smiles, men who looked at Arthur with something akin to reverence. Arthur hadn't just served his country, he had saved lives, quietly, consistently, year after year, forming bonds that transcended the battlefield. He had continued his life of quiet service, a man of profound impact, even when she, his closest companion, had only seen the gardener, the reader, the loving husband. Alara realized that Arthur's heroism wasn't just about medals or classified missions. It was about a lifetime of unwavering dedication to others, a legacy far richer and more complex than she had ever imagined. Days turned into a week, each one bringing Alara closer to the ceremony in Washington and further from the son she once knew. The house felt peaceful again, cleansed of the insidious greed that had poisoned it. Arthur's medal had been safely returned, nestled once more in its velvet bed, its true significance now fully appreciated. The $250,000 from the insurance policy, along with the pension payments, had been rerouted to her account, restoring a sense of security that Julian had so brazenly tried to steal. Then, one evening, as dusk settled over the garden Arthur had so lovingly tended, a hesitant knock sounded on the front door. Alara opened it to find Julian standing on her porch. He looked utterly broken, a shadow of his former self. His usually neatly styled hair was disheveled, his clothes rumpled, and his eyes, once so bright and confident, were now hollow and bloodshot. In the span of a week, the stress and the reality of his actions had aged him 10 years. He looked like a cornered animal, desperate and terrified. "Mom," he began, his voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. He swallowed hard, struggling to meet her gaze. I came to apologize. I never meant for any of this to get so out of hand. I made some terrible mistakes." Alara looked at him, her heart a tangled knot of grief, anger, and residual love for the boy he once was. "Out of hand, Julian?" she asked, her voice calm, almost dangerously so. "You committed federal felonies. You stole from your father's estate. You lied to me, repeatedly. You forged documents. You defrauded the government. You tried to sell a piece of national history for your own selfish gain. That's not out of hand, Julian. That's calculated, deliberate betrayal." Julian flinched, his shoulders slumping. He looked down at his worn shoes, unable to face her unwavering gaze. "I know, Mom, I know. I'm so sorry. I just thought I could fix things with the salon, and I needed the money so badly." "You didn't need money, Julian," Alara countered, her voice firm. "You wanted money, and you were willing to desecrate your father's memory and destroy your own mother's future to get it. You even lied about the price you sold the medal for, didn't you? Simon Reed told me it was $12,500, not $20. Did you think I wouldn't find out?" Julian's head snapped up, his face crumpling. The revelation that she knew even this small, insidious lie seemed to break something inside him. Tears welled in his eyes, tracking paths down his grimy cheeks. I was scared, Mom. So scared." Alara stepped back, opening the door wider, a silent invitation for him to come in. He stumbled past her and collapsed onto Arthur's armchair, the very chair he had refused to sit in during his last visit, the chair he had so readily dismissed as an old man's comfort. He sat there, hunched and defeated, a stark contrast to the self-assured man who had demanded his father's valuable items only days ago. Alara stood before him, her hands clasped in front of her. "You thought Arthur left nothing, didn't you? Nothing but an old house and a few dusty mementos. You thought he was just a quiet, retired man with no worth beyond the immediate. You were so wrong, Julian. So utterly, tragically wrong." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Arthur was receiving a consultant's pension from the Pentagon, $50,000 a year, Julian, for decades after his retirement. And there was a $250,000 military life insurance policy. All of it was designated for me. All of it you stole." Julian stared at her, his eyes wide with shock, his mouth agape. He had truly believed Arthur had been of no financial consequence, no more than a burden. The realization of the true wealth he had tried to steal, the sheer magnitude of Arthur's continued service and provision, seemed to hit him like a physical blow. He slowly sank back into the chair, the air hissing out of him. He had not only stolen from his mother, he had completely misjudged and undervalued his father, both financially and in every other way imaginable. Elara walked over to Arthur's desk and retrieved the folder filled with letters and photographs she had discovered. She placed it gently in Julian's trembling hands. "And this, Julian," she said, her voice softer now, tinged with a deep sadness. "This is your father's real legacy, the one you were too blind to see, too consumed by greed to appreciate." Julian opened the folder, his fingers fumbling. He looked at the photographs of the smiling aid workers, the grateful families, the weary but proud faces of the men Arthur had served with. He began to read the letters, one by one, their words of heartfelt gratitude bringing fresh tears to his eyes. He saw the thank you notes from parents whose children had come home because of Arthur. He saw the quiet, unspoken admiration in the eyes of his father's comrades. He finally looked up at Elara, his face streaked with tears, his voice choked with emotion. "Mom," he whispered, "he saved so many. All those lives. He was a hero. I never knew any of this. All this time I thought he was just dad. I never understood his sacrifice." He saw his father not as a means to an end, but as a man of extraordinary depth, courage, and impact. "How many, Mom? How many lives did he touch? Really save?" Elara looked at the documents, her eyes welling up with tears of pride and sorrow. "Based on these letters and the general's information, Julian, your father, Arthur Vance, directly or indirectly, saved 87 lives throughout his career, not just in classified missions, but in countless quiet acts of service, of mentorship, of support to others. He was a hero in every sense of the word." Julian stared at the folder, then at his mother, the enormity of his father's life and his own mistakes finally crashing down on him. "Mom, he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Is there anything I can do? Any way to make this right?" Elara sat beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Your consequence, Julian, is prison. You have to face that, but while you're there, you can read those letters. You can learn about the man your father truly was. You can understand his legacy, not in terms of money, but in terms of human lives and selfless devotion. Perhaps, in doing so, you can begin to understand what true worth means." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a desperate hope. "Will you visit me, Mom?" Elara took a deep breath. It was a complex question, laden with years of unspoken disappointment and recent pain. "You're still my son, Julian," she said softly, her voice wavering. "But trust is earned, and you have a very long way to go to earn it back. We'll see." 3 months later, the chilling grip of autumn had given way to the soft promise of spring. Elara found herself in the majestic Hall of Heroes at the Pentagon, a place steeped in the hallowed history of American valor. The vast room, usually quiet and reverent, hummed with a respectful anticipation. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the flags of every military branch and the portraits of countless heroes. She wore a simple, elegant black dress, a stark contrast to the profound posthumous blossoming in her heart. General Sterling, looking distinguished in his dress uniform, greeted her with a warm smile and a firm handshake. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his eyes twinkling, "Arthur would be incredibly proud today. This is a long overdue honor." Elara smiled, her eyes misting slightly. "I think he would have been embarrassed, General. He always preferred to work in the shadows." She was then introduced to 3 men, equally distinguished, their faces etched with the wisdom of years and the experiences of war. Commander Alex Thorne, Master Chief Ben Carter, and Lieutenant Colonel Leo Rodriguez. They were Arthur's surviving teammates from Operation Desert Rose, men who had faced death alongside him and bore the silent testament of their shared history. They embraced her, their eyes filled with a shared understanding and a profound respect for Arthur. Each man shared emotional stories, not just of Arthur's bravery in combat, but of his quiet strength, his unwavering loyalty, and his incredible mentorship. Commander Thorne, his voice rough with emotion, recounted how Arthur had literally pulled him from the jaws of death during a firefight, taking a bullet that would have been Thorne's. Master Chief Carter spoke of Arthur's uncanny ability to keep them calm under unimaginable pressure, his steady leadership a beacon in the darkest hours. Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez, a quiet man, simply said, "Arthur saved our lives, Mrs. Vance. More times than I can count. He was the best of us." Then General Sterling stepped to the podium. His voice, usually so precise and controlled, swelled with a genuine passion as he began his speech. He officially declassified Operation Desert Rose, detailing for the first time in public Arthur Vance's extraordinary heroism in leading the team that saved 6 American hostages from a brutal militant group in Syria. He spoke of the 47 minutes of relentless combat, the impossible odds, and Arthur's tactical genius that ensured every hostage came home alive. As the general concluded, a distinguished-looking woman in a crisp white lab coat stepped forward. Her eyes, Alara noticed, held a familiar spark of determination. "Mrs. Vance," she began, her voice clear and resonant, "my name is Dr. Emily Davies. I was 8 years old when Arthur Vance saved my life in Syria. I am now a pediatric surgeon, and I am here because of your husband." Tears streamed down her face as she spoke, clutching a stack of letters. "These are from the other families Arthur saved. We never forgot him. We never will." She presented Alara with the letters, a physical manifestation of Arthur's lifelong impact. Then, to Alara's utter astonishment, the Secretary of the Navy himself stepped forward. With a solemn, booming voice, he announced, "Today we elevate Arthur Vance's commendation for his unparalleled record of 43 successful missions and the confirmed saving of 87 American lives. The President of the United States has approved the posthumous award of the Navy Distinguished Service Medal with a gold star in lieu of a second award." A collective gasp swept through the hall. The Distinguished Service Medal, a recognition far beyond the original SEAL Medal, was one of the highest honors for military service, usually reserved for senior officers in positions of great responsibility. To be awarded it posthumously and to reveal such a staggering record of heroism was an unprecedented tribute. Alara felt a wave of profound pride and sorrow wash over her, a deep understanding of the man she had loved, finally made manifest for the world to see. After the ceremony, amidst the congratulations and expressions of gratitude, Commander Thorne pulled Alara aside. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice softer, more personal, "there's something else you should know about Arthur, about his quiet service. A few years ago, my son, he was battling addiction. Arthur, he found out. And even though he was battling his own cancer at the time, he flew to Colorado. He spent weeks there talking to my boy, getting him into rehab, never telling a soul. He was a mentor, a father figure, even when he had every right to focus on himself. That's who Arthur was, always putting others first." Alara's eyes welled up once more. Arthur's quiet battles, his hidden compassion, his unwavering selflessness. He was truly a hero in every facet of his life, a man who consistently chose service over self, even in the face of his own mortality. Later that week, Agent Miller called. "Mrs. Vance," she said, her voice matter-of-fact, "Julian Vance was sentenced today. 3 years in federal prison. Bethany Vance received 6 months, suspended, with 3 years of probation. They've lost everything, as per the restitution order." It was a stark, unyielding end to that chapter of her life. Meanwhile, Dr. Emily Davies had already begun to put her gratitude into action. She proposed establishing a scholarship fund in Arthur Vance's name, specifically for children of military families who wished to pursue careers in medicine. Alara, humbled and deeply touched, agreed to be a patron. Arthur's legacy, she realized, would not only live on in the annals of military history, but in the futures of young people he would never meet. Alara returned home, the quiet house feeling different now. She walked into Arthur's study, his sanctuary. She carefully placed the newly framed Navy Distinguished Service Medal next to his original SEAL Medal, the gleaming gold a testament to his extraordinary life. As she looked at them, side by side, a profound peace settled over her. She had defended his honor, brought his true legacy to light, and in doing so had found a strength within herself she never knew existed. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the return address, a federal correctional facility, left no doubt it was from Julian. Alara opened it with a mix of apprehension and hope. The letter was short, handwritten, and clearly remorseful. Julian expressed his profound shame, his deep regret for his actions. He spoke of the solitude of his days, the endless hours spent reflecting on his life, on his father. "Mom," he wrote, "I've been reading those letters you gave me. I'm starting to understand. Dad wasn't just a good man. He was a truly great one. A hero. I never saw it. I was so caught up in myself and what I thought I deserved that I completely missed the most important things." He ended with a powerful vow. "I don't know what the future holds for me, but I promise you, Mom, I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of being Arthur Vance's son." Alara held the letter, her tears falling onto the ink. It was not an absolution, not yet, but it was a beginning, a glimmer of hope for a son who had lost his way. And as she looked out at the spring garden, where Arthur's roses were beginning to bloom, Alara realized that while she had fought fiercely for Arthur's legacy, she had, in the process, forged her own. She was Alara Vance, strong, resilient, and finally truly at peace.